Live on another episode of All Things 3D. Today's Thursday episode is December 18th, 2014, and we've got an exciting guest to introduce you to. His name is Brooks Myers. He's the CEO of Knockout Concepts, and welcome to the program. I'm your co-host, Chris Kopak.
Hi,
Thanks.
and I'm Mike, and right now we've got a video showing something from Brooks. And Brooks, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? What's your name? Where do you come from? And what do you do for a living?
Hello, everybody. My name is Brooks Myers. I'm the CEO of Knockout Concepts, and we're a Columbus, Ohio-based company. And our focus is building mobile 3D scanning systems that operate in real time, in the palm of your hand.
Wow.
Palm of your hand. Sounds pretty
That's right.
Well, on that, we can probably go right into our first set of questions, and that is, I guess I'm kind of an aficionado or an enthusiast about 3D scanning. I've worked with several of them, and as you saw in my show notes as well as in our email discussions, and I literally kind of stumbled upon your particular product, and I think it was at a maker fair in Ohio, or a mini maker fair, and I said, wow, this is kind of neat, and I saw that it was using an ARM-based device. So maybe you can kind of elaborate on this, and we'll go right into the first question. Is it an ARM-based platform?
Yes, we currently develop on ARM, and we have developed a few things on other devices as well, but our device that you saw, if it was at Maker Faire Columbus just recently, then that would have been showing our most recent prototypes. And the video that you first showed was a prototype that we had taken to Maker Faire Detroit earlier this year, and also took it to Maker Faire New York and got an Editor's Choice Blue Ribbon at Maker Faire New York.
Yeah, I saw that.
This video was taken a little while ago, and since then we've updated devices and software to include new features, but the processor is also a little bit outdated in this device, in this video. So things have gotten a little bit smoother for us as well as we continue to plug away. But ARM is the focus. So
why haven't I heard anything about you? I mean, like I said, I literally had to do some searching on something else to stumble upon this. So
sure.
Yeah.
I think you probably haven't heard about us because we haven't done a whole lot of marketing. We've been, operating in stealth mode, doing a lot of R&D. We haven't launched a product yet, and so as we've been developing and working away at this thing, we want to make sure that we build it to a certain place that is impressive enough that users can find the utility through using such a device that allows you to capture 3D models quickly and easily, right on the fly, just in real time. So this is just because we haven't really had our coming out party that you haven't heard of us. I really believe that's probably mostly the reason, and you'll probably see a lot more about us in the coming months.
Well, that's really exciting, and I'm going to go ahead and go right to your team. Obviously, it's just more than one person. There you are.
Sure.
It looks like you've got a background in art and design and industrial design.
Yes.
And you have a few patents. You want to kind of talk about that a little bit?
Well, intellectual property is just an important part for every business, especially when you're making new products. And in new areas that are just starting to grow and people are just starting to discover this stuff, with the learning curve for 3D printing and anything new that comes out, it takes many, many years before generally everybody understands what these things are, how they can make an impact. And so we generally, like anybody else would, we're actively filing intellectual property as we build proprietary systems internally.
Okay, sounds good. I noticed when I was looking through your little bio here that you have a stereoscopic background or stereoscopy.
I did some work early on in stereoscopy, and some of my studies in art school led me to do some stereoscopy video and photos, and I started to explore some things, what can you do with 3D beyond just stereoscopy and for reconstruction of 3D objects and things like this. So you can see that that really intersects well with design, specifically industrial design and modeling and 3D CAD software. So
really cool. We just did an interview, or I did an interview last week with a stereoscopic image, what would you call it, photographer.
Okay.
Los Osos. He's
cool.
He's fairly big in the industry. Works a lot in the film, behind the scenes, doing stereo imaging for some production. He hasn't done anything in a while, but he's well versed. It was very interesting. He does what they call hyper stereoscopic imaging. You're probably familiar with that, where your interocular is much wider than your eyes, but it gives you a better presence for landscapes. That's what his expertise is. So I thought that was kind of interesting to read that you also have some experience in that. So I'd like to go right into, we just kind of talked about ARM. ARM normally is associated with Android or Linux, and I guess I'd like to know which platform you're narrowing it down to. You did mention that you're going to be using it on more than one platform, but I'm hoping the answer is that it's Android-based. Is this the case?
This is the case, yes. As we were moving forward, we were looking for a platform that could have mass appeal and something that had developer support. Linux is something we've also developed with, but everybody is well aware that Android is a much more accessible platform, especially for mobility, and that led us to develop in Android.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
And so you guys are developing not only you guys are developing the software in-house, right?
That's correct. That's correct. We've created our own software and algorithms.
And are you also developing hardware, or are you using existing hardware?
We've done both, and we are still on the path to do both. Currently, we have created systems built with off-the-shelf components. We have also built custom components like the one that you saw in the video, where you are looking at that device and it's unique. There's no tablet inside that thing, for instance. This device in this photo here from Maker Faire, New York. And that's actually a pretty cool picture because it shows off the power of prototyping here. This is a completely 3D printed enclosure, and it's utilizing our sensor with an ARM processor inside. And if you took the lid open on that thing, there's a lot of solder and wires and components under the hood there. So we have done both off-the-shelf systems and one-off prototype systems.
One of the articles that I read indicated that you were using the PrimeSense sensor, and through my own studies and our previous interviews, we have found that the PrimeSense, or the company behind the PrimeSense sensor, was purchased by Apple, and that seems to be creating some issues not only in the open source market, because OpenNI just kind of closed down their shop, but more importantly, getting the actual sensor is going to be a huge problem. Now, you did mention that you're working on some proprietary. So was your original design a PrimeSense, and you've moved to something else? I've noticed you've got the dual lenses here.
We've built prototypes using PrimeSense sensors. I think when our original designs and developments predated knowledge of something of Connect or PrimeSense before they really got their name out there. We're working on this predating any of that information. So we developed our own systems. We also looked at whatever else was coming out. But PrimeSense cameras, if OpenNI is off the table and everything else, does create somewhat of a moving landscape in this market. We still haven't yet heard from Apple what they're planning to do with that technology, but we have relationships with other leaders in this space and are working on other technologies as well as those technologies to find really the best combination. We're using the bleeding edge technology here and going out into the field every day to test and develop better product.
Okay, so you're actually looking at different processes instead of just the PrimeSense. Do you care to share some of the technical background behind that, or are you too early in the game at this point?
Well, technically speaking, I mean, what we can talk about and what most people will learn as they work with 3D scanners is that they're all very different. Depending upon what you need to do, whether it's your subject matter is unique or your plan for what you're going to do with these 3D models or 3D matter once you capture them, you might want to start with a different product and or entirely different technologies out of the gate. So this is not a one-size-fits-all tool, 3D scanners and 3D scanning technology, and there are generally a few principal techniques. You know, 3D scanning on Wikipedia, you've got quite a big resource out there of information these days, and I think more and more people are going to start to wrap their heads around this stuff just as the 3D printers are being pretty well adopted and people are, you know, jumping into that scene where there's an entire language of its own for 3D printing and again for 3D scanning, and there will be the same. But you've got structured light, which is what PrimeSense uses, time of flight, which allows different techniques, and then you've got stereoscopy.
Yeah, that's what the Connect 2 uses in their new
Correct.
The time of flight for their new Connect 2. That
Yes.
wasn't the case in the original unit. Go ahead, sorry.
No, that's all true. So the industry seems to be kind of looking at whatever is out there to see what can we continue to make and improve upon in these initial systems. So for us, we still see this as a starting gate, and first time that you can ever get a device like this, and it's going to grow and improve as we iterate.
Yeah, you mentioned the word that the first time. If you looked in my show notes, there actually is another company out there that has a product that utilizes the PrimeSense technology. They
Sure.
obviously had gotten a contract well before Apple purchased them, and from our previous interviews with them, they seem to have enough of supply not to be concerned at this point. But it is works on structured light, like the original Connect. In fact, it's just basically a shrunken down version, and what I'm talking about is the Occipital Structure Sensor, and
Sure.
or the 3D Systems licensed version, the iSense. So there is an actual product out there, and attached to an iOS device, it is mobile. I'm assuming that you're aware of this.
Oh, yes.
And how does
Yeah.
that affect your progress in this market?
Well, you know, it basically as soon as we heard any kind of news surrounding the potential sale of PrimeSense, we realized that that probably wasn't going to be a place that we could find longevity of product. So we went out and made relationships with other companies that create other devices that can work for what we're trying to accomplish, and talked with them. And the fact that I think it's called the structure sensor came out was surprising to us at the time. We also were in communication with PrimeSense at that time. And I don't want to share a whole lot of details there, but I think that it's interesting to see that in this young space, there's a lot of attention starting to be cast in this direction. So we would offer a very similar product to what anybody who is used to using a structure sensor or otherwise a Connect for reconstructing 3D models. You understand the general experience or the general techniques and the technology and or the results of using those devices as 3D scanners. And very early on we moved to make similar systems, but cut the cord, put it all under a mobile device's hood, give you a nice touch screen on it, and be able to capture in real time using mobile processors. So I think the biggest difference between them and us from the start is that they sell just the sensor that needs to be plugged into the iPad, and I don't know if they have plans to plug it into other things, but right now that's all it is, and you need to have an iPad to plug it into, and you're limited to a certain degree with what it can do.
So it sounds like you guys are maybe developing your own hardware, maybe.
Yes.
And so are you planning on selling the hardware bundled with software, or hardware and open an SDK up, you know, and or both? so
we
that
have
develop software on their own for your sensor?
Sure, Chris. We have an SDK that we have developed. So if you want to build applications in the Android environment and run them and utilize the depth information and create a customized application, you can do that. So we created an SDK to do that.
Is that available now?
No, we have not released it yet. We are working with a Pioneer program currently and have early alpha and beta testers. So this is a program that we are going to start to release more information about moving forward because we're just now launching into that process. So we haven't had a first public release of it.
So I guess a couple questions. If you would like to be a developer, I'm assuming they can contact you. And
Sure.
if you become a developer, do they also get an alpha version of the hardware, or do they have to supply their own hardware?
You would need to utilize our hardware, and we're still hammering out the details there. Right now, because we're located in Columbus, Ohio, we're working with local individuals, developers, and businesses here in Columbus, Ohio. It helps us give a little bit more attention to the people working with the software and have them sit down next to us and really dig into the SDK and work on that level. So we haven't really reached out further than that at this point, but there will be more information coming about that, and we will sell development kits for developers.
Okay. And the SDK is an Android-based SDK, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
But
So
at the same time, you're developing your own software to go along with it.
Yes, we have our own software for 3D reconstruction. We have a team of some PhDs and other individuals who are very sharp, and we've put together our own software completely for capturing 3D models using our SDK and our device.
Awesome.
Okay. Do you have some meshes or something available that somebody could download to take a look at the quality of your captures?
We are just about to go to CES, and so we're looking at putting up a bunch of stuff people can see on our website. We haven't done a lot of that in the past, and really we've been, not as active as we could be capturing videos on site and sharing, where we're at with this whole process, but we like to be pretty tight-lipped about things as we sneak out more and more info. But yeah, on our website we plan on posting some more meshes that people can access to see what we're capable of right now.
Very cool. On that note, you said you're going to be going to CES. Are you going to have a booth there? And if so, what is your booth number?
We actually do not have a booth this year, but we are going to be there with scanners in hand, and if you would like to have a meeting with us, you are more than welcome to email info@knockoutconcepts.com. I'll be there with my team. Hit me up and we'll make sure to sit down with you and share with you what we've developed.
Great, I appreciate that. And go ahead and send me an email with that same information. I'll make sure it's in the show notes.
Sure, Michael.
Show notes for our YouTube as well as our podcast site.
Cool.
One other question for you, and it's in the notes, and it's a little bit more technical. You're probably familiar with the NVIDIA K1 chip. Have you looked into that? Have you tried to experiment with that? Because one of the advantages, in my opinion, is that it uses CUDA cores, and there is a whole library that will be available, if not already for Android, to support that. And I know that some of the other software packages do use the GPU functionality in order to enhance or improve the performance of 3D scanning and creating the mesh functions. So are you using something similar to that or looking into that as a possible tablet-style device?
Yeah, we're definitely looking into that. We have Jetson, we have K1, we've experimented with most all of these boards. And I think the key point that you make is mobile GPU is the future. This is making this possible. And so for us to always be looking at the GPU roadmap, the mobile processors roadmap, we're looking to make sure that our device is as fluid as possible, utilizing the most bleeding edge tech.
To get the most high quality scans, I guess, right? Is
sure.
Really,
yeah, get that frame rate up.
Right.
Yeah,
so the higher the better the processor, the more quality you can get out of your scan in a quicker period, is my understanding.
This is correct, Chris.
Got it.
So as mobile starts rivaling desktop, this is a great time and place.
No, and that's very important. That's why I bring up the K1 chip. It, in some cases, actually rivals a desktop GPU.
Sure.
Because it's based on the same Maxwell underpinnings. So if you've got, let's say, the 750 or 760, it's almost identical to the K1 as from the GPU perspective. And then,
Right.
as you're aware of, it also includes the ARM technology. I think it's the A15 processor as well. So it's a high-performance chip. It's already available in their tablet and also in the Google, oh, sorry to mention that word, but in their Nexus 6 tablet, which a lot of, I'm sorry, Nexus 9 tablet, which a lot of people have been impressed with.
I'm wondering on what you're saying, Mike. I'm wondering, and for both of you, this you guys might actually know is I'm a huge fan of the Raspberry Pi, massive, and the Arduinos, and but one of the obviously the common complaints is that it just doesn't have the computational power that like something that a 3D scanner would demand, right?
Yes.
So I'm wondering why. I mean, and Raspberry Pi is an open source design. It seems like to me some of the benefits of the Raspberry Pi is the fact that like for instance, we interviewed the Print to Pi people on our show the other day. They have a piece of software that you can run on the internet, and you can install their operating system. You can flash a little SD card that you put into your Raspberry Pi, and you can control your 3D printer over an internet interface, right? So that's awesome. I think that's a really forward-thinking idea. And one of the cool things about the Raspberry Pi is that you can control the operating system. So you have full control over every application that's on there. It's not even really designed to be hooked up to a monitor, right? It just is meant to be like a dummy little, almost like a little networked controller. So what I'm thinking is, when are we going to start seeing Raspberry Pis with, beefier GPUs? And it seems like to me, wouldn't this be a good way to go? Because you could control the whole operating system, you could actually make a proprietary scanner with Raspberry Pi like hardware. Is that something you've seen? Is a Raspberry Pi with an onboard GPU?
Brooks, I'll let you take the first turn at that.
It's one of those things, I think, like you said, and it seems like that could make sense moving forward. It's yet to be seen, though, that they can bring the horsepower. And the other thing that tends to happen, even with those kits, is they do balloon fairly quickly. I mean, you've got a board here, a board there, and you slap a shield on it, and the next thing you know, your mobile device looks pretty, funny if it were to be sitting, say, on the store shelf next to the other tablets and other mobile devices. I think that would gather the consumer interest if, the consumer is even
aesthetic
there for
appeal.
This yet. I mean, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the consumer is the target, but tablets and mobile form factors need to be as slim as they can be, and computers have come a long way, and mobile devices have come a long way to see that. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what the Pi guys do with all of this, but
right.
There continues to be more and more cool projects coming out of that house. So
well, let's look at another approach, and is you mentioned you wanted an all-in-one product, but what if you, whatever technology you work with from the sensor standpoint, make it attachable to a variety of tablets,
sure.
or even phones. Like the Note 4 is an extremely powerful 6-inch type device.
Yes, it is.
And if you've worked or seen the structure sensor, it's about 5.5 inches, so it would fit nicely. In fact, if I might show you, because I actually work with the structure sensor, and I'll go ahead and flip to my screen here. Can you see it here? I have actually created an attachment system, which is what I'm working on in part of my company, that actually uses it, but it's limited, as you mentioned, to iPhones or iPads, and I'd like to see something using the K1 or the Android side. So it'd be kind of cool if you could provide the capability so that I could take your sensor and your Android application and run it on something else, and design my own bracket or design my own case and not be confined to it. And to me, it would seem like it would expedite your process as well if you went in that direction with more flexibility. But maybe there's some disadvantages. Maybe you can kind of expand upon that.
I would say for just if we're going to touch on the disadvantages or where it gets tricky to run out and do that from the start, or again, why did Structure choose iOS? Processors. If you're going to be developing an application or a process as intensive as this, where you're interfacing these hardware devices with the processor and you want every action to work properly, you'd have to code it properly for every individual processor. So that your processor in your device would be compatible. So making compatibility for all Android devices is definitely an exciting goal, and we're just now starting to build the first ones. But yeah, that's something that you could see moving
Well, you
forward,
could even
making a
narrow
lot
it
of
to
sense. Sure, you could.
specific
You could have
machines,
just a
the
small,
K1 tablets,
yes,
or the higher end Samsung,
right.
or even the Google Shutter products. But again, you could limit that market. It doesn't have to be for the whole Android market. You know, the concern I see is that if you do everything in-house, that's require a large development team to not only create the sensor, but also to create the tablet design and the processor. Having some design background myself, that is a horrendous project undertaken with a large variety of disciplines that need to be involved with that. And
That's correct.
I don't know if you've got all the funding to do this, but that's going to require a team with a hefty payroll, and yeah, that might kind of lead into my next question: is how do you plan to financially support this or fund this? Are you looking at Kickstarter or some other type of funding system, or are you already funded already and money's no object?
Money's always an object, right? That's what it takes to
I
get
don't know. Some people
all
are
things done.
independently wealthy,
That's true.
rich
That's
uncle
true.
or something.
We are not funded by a rich uncle. That would be pretty awesome. We did take some seed funding, and that has given us the ability to jump into full-fledged operation of Knockout Concepts. We are still moving in funding rounds and talking to VCs and taking those next leaps. So we are not fully funded by any means, and like you mentioned before, with all of the disciplines required, this is an exciting project for engineers, and it's pretty fun for us to piece it together. And we know that there's multiple things in the air here when you start talking about hardware and software. But so far we found enough interest, and it's working for us. We got into the space early enough that we've developed products that can solve problems for people. So I hope I've answered the question, but if there's...
No, you have, and that's
Okay.
good. But taking it further, are you looking
Yes.
at Kickstarter or some other funding, or are you going to try and...
Okay. Kickstarter, we definitely wanted to go to Kickstarter, and we are still thinking about doing that. We just haven't been able to really point to a week or a month on the map and say, let's do it. That being said, the $50,000 or $100K that might come from Kickstarter is very powerful validation, I think, to the idea. And we may be already, you know, at least for the guys in this Google chat right here, we know this space a little bit well enough to see the potential. Maybe it doesn't need validation through the Kickstarter, and Kickstarter is definitely, although a funding platform, I see it as a marketing and analysis platform to find out, hey, does this idea have any weight? Will this fly?
Right.
And we found already from enough just interaction with the industry that this idea can definitely fly. And yes, it takes a lot of money. So.
Yeah, well, again, as mentioned, you haven't done a lot of marketing, and I had to really search to find you, actually. I was searching for other things, but you are obscure, so
Yes.
maybe Kickstarter or getting some news out to some of the other 3D blogs might be important in the future. But that leads
Very
us
much
probably
so.
to the final question, which is, when do you expect this to be available, and do you have a price?
So 2015 is definitely looking like the year for us for delivery on units. And as far as price is concerned, we have a couple different things that we're working with as far as pricing models, and it all just depends on the customer. Realize right now we aren't just moving units to Best Buy or something like that where you can go grab a mobile 3D scanner and be off and running, but it shouldn't be too far out before something would come down to your,
I didn't know Best Buy had a mobile 3D scanner.
Oh, exactly. They don't, right? But we've seen more electronics stores have 3D printers and sense scanners and MakerBot turntables and things of this type. So I think as these devices start to be a little bit more in people's vision, we'll see more and more things creep down into the general price point that consumers are willing to chomp on. And it's usually in this $1,000 price point for these types of technology products. We haven't been able to come down that low in our price yet to be able to do it, but as we scale up, this is something that we'd like to accomplish.
Okay. And Chris, I'll give you the last anchor question.
Yeah, well, mine was basically along the same lines of when we might be able to see this product. I think it's really, really exciting. Have you ever entertained going into putting any code on GitHub?
Sure. Yes, we've entertained doing that. And right now, I think that is the most important point here: is that developers are the guys that make the apps, which are the magic behind our devices. These things don't do anything for us without utility and applications. So developers are huge. Our development community is something that we're just starting to reach out to, like I said, with our alpha and beta testers and starting this Pioneer program. So if you do want us to keep you up to date and in the loop about that, I'll make sure to raise our profile about these things as soon as they go forward. So you guys
we
can
do a weekly podcast called 3D in Review, so we'd love to keep up to date with you after this interview and see where you're heading with this and any milestones, and we'd be glad to mention it.
Great.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on our program, and thanks to all of our listeners for joining us on All Things 3D with Brooks Meyer from Knockout Concepts.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.